Hey guys, welcome to my channel, Perspective with Kate. I'm really excited to start this podcast. I got the idea after, I'm sure you guys seen the George Floyd incident. I know it's what everyone is talking about right now, and it really gave me inspiration after further looking into a few more cases like his and other cases of people on death row, cases that have been closed and look highly suspicious. And I just wanted to bring those cases to light because I feel like they need that attention. And so before we begin, I just want to let you guys know my intentions behind these podcasts. And, I'm really here to educate you guys. I'm here to spread awareness. I'm here to give you a new perspective. And I'm here to give you guys a chance to hear a different opinion and different sides of the stories of these cases. And I feel they're really important, and I hope you guys, after listening, will feel the same way. The first case I want to talk to you guys about is a death row case. Julius Jones was 19 years old at the time of his arrest in 1999. And he has now been on death row for over 20 years and is almost 40 years old. Julius Jones was a suspect of a shooting and carjacking the night of Wednesday, July 28th, 1999 in Edmond, Oklahoma. And I want to give you guys a little background about the city of Edmond. Now, Julius Jones actually lived in Oklahoma City. And Edmond, where the crime actually took place, was about 8 miles away from Julius's parents' home, where he was staying that night. And so Edmond is a predominantly white community. It's a very wealthy, known to be very safe. No crime ever happened there. And it was all around, a great neighborhood. And everyone basically slept with their doors unlocked, and they really felt safe there. But that all took a turn the night of July 28, 1999, when Paul Howell returned home to his parents' house after school supply shopping with his children and sister. When they returned home around 9:30 p.m., a young black male walked up to Paul Howell's GMC Suburban and shot him. And as the shooting is taking place, the children and sister run into the parents' home, and the car is actually stolen. Now, the sister of Paul Howell, Megan Toby, is the only eyewitness in this case, and she is the only person who actually saw the shooter. Now, Megan describes this young black African-American male wearing a white shirt, a red bandana, and a stocking cap over his face. She wasn't able to actually identify the perp. She also stated that, and this is a very key player in the whole case. She said that she noticed that a piece of hair was sticking out underneath the stocking cap. And so the police arrive and they're checking out the scene, they're investigating everything, and the police actually believe that the motivation behind the shooting and the stealing of the car was that Howard's GMC, his Suburban, was a desirable car back then, and it was easy to take apart, and the parts were worth a lot of money. So it was a common and known thing for these Suburbans to be sought out and sold and chopped up for parts. You now can imagine the fear and panic and urgency to find this shooter. I mean, this is a neighborhood where nothing bad ever happens, and the community is completely shook by this. So the police are now on a hunt for not only the shooter, but the golden tannish GMC Suburban. And the next day, so this happened on a Wednesday night around 9:30 p.m. So the next day, on the Thursday, the police they run the plates, they find the GMC parked at a grocery store on the south side of Oklahoma City. And what makes this grocery store so important is that it was actually around the block from a well-known chop shop ran by a guy named Kermit Lottie. And Kermit Lottie just so happens to be a long-time informant for the police. Basically, people would bring him cars to chop up. Either they were stolen or, linked to different crimes. And the police went to him to get information. And Kermit did this all the time. So they knew exactly where to go, especially since the GMC was found right around the corner from his chop shop. The police get to Kermit Lottie's chop shop and they start questioning him. And Kermit states that a guy named Liddell King, who went by Day Day, had stopped by to try to sell the GMC for parts. Now, this guy Liddell had been known as a car thief, and he also had a lot of run-ins with the police. And he often, when he got picked up, he would tell the police things that he thought they wanted to hear so that he can get off on either a lesser sentence or, a get out of jail free card altogether. And he was known for this. And so the police bring Liddell into question. They find him, and he states that he knew what happened, but he was just the middleman of the entire incident. He told police that on the night of the shooting, a guy named Chris Jordan came to his apartment in a car, and a few minutes later, Julius Jones drives up in a GMC. And according to Liddell, since he was known for selling parts, Julius asked him to take the GMC to a chop shop for him to sell for parts. So Liddell says he takes the GMC to Kermit Lottie's chop shop, but Kermit refused to take the GMC because he saw on the news that there could possibly be a homicide connected to the same color GMC that he brought there. So Kermit Lottie refused to take it. So Liddell says he returns home and he turns on the TV and he sees on the news that the homicide is actually linked to the same exact GMC that Julius brought to his apartment. Now, Liddell also states that Julius was wearing the exact clothing of the shooter's description, the white t-shirt and the red bandana. And he even claims that eventually Julius admitted to the shooting, stating that it was a robbery gone wrong. Now, before I continue, I want to tell you guys a little bit about Julius Jones. So, at the time, he was 19 years old. He was actually attending the University of Oklahoma. He was on a full paid scholarship. He played basketball in high school. His high school teachers raved about him. They all said, that Julius was a joy to teach. And, he was an all-around likable guy. And he came home for the summer to stay with his parents, back and forth from his apartment by the University of Oklahoma and his parents' house. So he was back and forth all summer. And according to a few of his other close friends, that during this summer, Julius started hanging around some questionable people. And one of those questionable people is Chris Jordan. Now, Julius states that his relationship with Chris Jordan was basically, what had happened was Julius was taking Chris's ACT test, and Chris was paying him to take other tests, his homework, things like that. And also in return, Chris would often give rides to Julius when he needed them, back and forth from his parents' house to his apartment. Now, I do want to mention, as great as Julius was in school, he was a bright young man. He was ranked 12th out of his class. That's not to say he didn't have some run-ins with the police before. He did have a few petty theft incidents, which Julius claims that they were all things that, basically the cool kids were wearing at the university, and he wanted them. He couldn't afford them. He didn't have the money for it. So he went ahead and sold those things. Okay, so now that you kind of have a picture of Julius and his friendship with Chris, I want to go to the day of his arrest. So Friday, which was 2 days after the murder, the police called Julius's home looking for him. And according to Julius, the police called earlier that day, and when he answered the phone and asked who they were looking for, and they said they were looking for Julius, he says that he got afraid and just completely hung up the phone. And he states that in the environment that he grew up in, you were to fear the police and you weren't really supposed to speak to them because bad things could happen to you or your family. And so he hung up and he went about his day and he left his home. Julius says that after he leaves his parents' home, he actually runs into Chris. And he tells Chris that the police are looking for him. And Chris says, don't worry about it. They're just looking for us. Go on about your day. And Julius believed that Chris meant that the police were looking for Chris and Chris's brother because they were always in trouble or up to no good. And so when Chris said that, Julius never once thought that, the police are looking for, me and Chris. He thought that the police were looking for Chris and his brother. And he didn't ask any more questions. So Julius ends up visiting Chris's brother's apartment that afternoon. And he gets there, they're, doing their own thing, and then they put the TV on. And this is the moment that Julius sees what's going on. At his parents' home, there are tons of police surrounding his home. There's news stations, there's the media's there, and it is mass chaos. And the whole chaos was because they found a gun wrapped in a red bandana in Julius's parents' home upstairs in the attic, near a room of the attic. And this is when Julius, realizes, this is bad, and he's shocked, he's stunned, he doesn't know what's going on. So I want to kind of back up on that Friday because remember when I said that Julius actually had ran into Chris on his way out of the house? Well, shortly after that, the police actually pick Chris up and they take him into custody, and Chris is telling all. Chris tells the police that he was there during the shooting, he saw the whole thing, but he was just the driver, and that Julius was actually the one who shot Paul Howell. Chris states that he and Julius followed the GMC home, pulled up near the GMC, and Julius got out of the car and shot Paul Howell and stole the vehicle. And the thing with Chris's testimony when he was picked up is that he was all over the place. At first he says that he didn't touch the gun at all. Then he states that, maybe my fingerprints may be on the gun, or, I actually may have touched the gun. And he just goes back and forth. 1 minute he's saying that he actually saw with his own eyes that Julius shot Paul, and then the next minute he's saying that he was too far away to see the shooting. He actually just heard the gun go off. He never saw Julius shoot. And he had a ton of inconsistencies. And not only that, but the police are sitting here telling Chris that if he cooperates with them, they would basically help him in his sentencing, and that he would only get 30 years and he wouldn't get the death penalty. And so he had a lot of motivation to put the blame on to Julius. And so this leads to Julius's arrest. They somehow got a tip that Julius was at Chris's brother's home, and that's where the police eventually picked Julius up. And now both the boys, Chris and Julius, are in custody and being charged for first-degree murder. But I want to talk about the DA at the time as well. So Bob Macy was a DA, and he was your all-American Western cowboy. He, believed in harsh punishments. He was a full believer in the death penalty, and he used it whenever he could. And not only that, but before the boys even went to trial, before Julius went to trial, he publicly stated in the news that he was seeking the death penalty for Julius Jones. And that's just something that really bothered me, because here you have two black males in custody, and we haven't even gone to trial yet. We don't even know what truly happened. And your DA, who people in the community look up to, and he is gunning for the death penalty. I want to talk about Julius's public defender. He had two. He had the first public defender was David McKenzie, and this guy was shitty, okay? I mean, the guy even admits he did a crappy job. He never even denied it. He only visited Julius once a month, and he claims he had over 70 cases at the time that he was handling, and he had a lot on his plate. And so Robin McPhail was the other public defender, and she actually visited Julius more often. She really backed Julius up and believed in his alibi. But the truth was that they were at a huge disadvantage. They both were fresh out of, well, Robin McPhail was fresh out of law school, and David McKenzie hadn't really been a lawyer for that long, and neither of them had ever went to trial for a capital case before. And so they really didn't know what they were doing, unfortunately. And unfortunately for Julius, I feel like this hugely, highly worked against him. So David McKenzie and Robin McPhail had a few things to present in trial that would help out Julius. One of the main things was his alibi. The night of the shooting, which was Wednesday, July 28th, 1999, Julius and his family claimed that they were at home eating spaghetti, playing Monopoly. Julius had actually been there all day, and he was there up until about 11:30 p.m. Now, the shooting took place around 9:30 p.m., and he said that he was waiting on Chris Jordan to pick him up to bring him back to his apartments from his parents' house. And when Chris arrived, it wasn't until about 11:30. And so this alibi was strong, they thought, because this proved that Julius was nowhere near the shooting, because Edmond was 8 miles away from Oklahoma City, and Julius was at his parents' eating spaghetti at 9:30 p.m. But unfortunately, his defenders didn't think that the jurors would believe him, because it was his family backing him up, and they didn't think that this was solid enough. But there were a few other things that they did bring up during the case, and one was that there were no fingerprints on the gun or the car, and also the red bandana that they found that the gun was wrapped in, it was tested for DNA. I know for a long time, like I think up until 2018 or 19, it wasn't even tested, and they actually tested it recently, and Julius's partial DNA was on the red bandana, but so were 3 other partial DNAs. Julius's new public defender in 2020 pointed out that it really wasn't a significant finding, because the theory was that the shooter yelled when he had their bandana wrapped over his face, and so there should have been saliva, and none was found. So they weren't even really sure if that bandana that was found in Julius's attic was the same one worn by the shooter. And so they kind of threw that out for a loop right now. I know people are still questioning it. Some people say that, since Julius's DNA is on it, it had to be him. And then there are others that are saying, saliva wasn't found on it. How can we be sure that this was the actual red bandana that was used during the shooting? Another piece of evidence that was presented in court, but it wasn't really pushed as far as it could have, was the fact that the witness, Paul Howell's sister, Megan Toby, said that the shooter had longer hair and that his hair was sticking out of the stocking cap. I want to remind you guys that Julius was arrested in 1999, but he actually didn't go to trial until 2002. And 9 days before he was arrested in 1999, he had actually got stopped by the cops, and they ended up letting him go, but they did take a picture of him. And so this was a piece of evidence that they could have used in the trial to prove that Julius had short hair at the time of the shooting. But David McKenzie never showed the photo of Julius's hair at the time, and he never really pressed further on about this evidence, and so it was kind of just pushed aside. Another thing I'd like to point out is that The night after the shooting, so this happened on Wednesday, so the Thursday night, Chris actually slept at Julius's parents' home, and he slept in the upstairs bedroom near the attic where the gun was found, and Julius slept downstairs. And Julius's sister and brother both claimed that they caught Chris sneaking around the house that night, which is very, very suspicious to me. The murder happens the Wednesday, and then Chris sleeps at Julius's the Thursday, and then points the police to his house the Friday where they find the murder weapon. Now you can see how I'm a little confused, and but this also wasn't brought up in court. And it's just like, how many more pieces of the puzzle were thrown out of the window? And in my opinion, I mean, this was brutal for Julius's case. And not only that, but the worst part of the whole trial is that David McKenzie never once let Julius take the stand and tell his side of the story, which is unbelievable. I mean, this kid, he was 19 years old, and he never got the chance to tell his side of the story. The jurors never got to hear his side of the story. And I believe that played the downfall of Julius's case and trial. And the jurors on the trial were all white with one African American, and we find out later that a few African Americans that were talked to be put on trial, they wouldn't let them participate because they either knew Julius or knew people involved, and so they couldn't be part of the trial. But come to find out, a few of the white people that actually sat on the juror stand knew people involved as well, and they apparently knew this and still let them sit on the trial. And that is just absurd to me. I can't even wrap my head around how this happened and how our system let this slide. And also recently, I think in 2019, it came out that one of the jurors actually used the N-word when describing Julius, and another said they should just take Julius out back and shoot him already. And if this doesn't give you the full picture and scenario of how it was in 1999 in Oklahoma, then I'm not sure what will. And it only took them 5 hours to find Julius guilty in the first degree and sentence him to death row. And since Julius did not get to provide his side of the story during trial, I recently watched Viola Davis's documentary about Julius called The Last Defense, and Julius finally got to explain his side of the story, and I'd like to tell you guys his side. So, here's Julius' side of the story. Julius says that he was visiting his parents' house the whole day Wednesday up until about 11:30 p.m. He was waiting on Chris to pick him up and bring him back to his apartment near the University of Oklahoma. When Chris arrived that night, Julius asked him what took so long. And Chris explains that he got into it with someone and whatever he wanted to do didn't go right. And Julius kept pressing him for questions and asking him for details, and Chris ultimately said, don't worry about it. It has nothing to do with you. I'm done talking about it. So Julius left it alone. And so the next day, the Thursday, Liddell, do you remember Liddell? Day. He paged Julius looking for Chris. And Julius stated that he didn't know where Chris was. So then Liddell asked Julius for help. He couldn't find Chris, so he asked him if he would help him. And he needed help moving a truck, and that he would pay Julius for helping him. And so Julius says that he was very hesitant at first because he knew that Liddell was usually up to no good, but he really needed the money. And so Julius says that he jumped into Liddell's car and followed him to Kermit Lottie's chop shop. So Julius actually never got into the GMC. He got into Liddell's car and followed him to the chop shop. So Julius says that he stayed in the car while Liddell spoke with Kermit, and a few minutes later, Liddell returned saying that Kermit wouldn't take it because it possibly had a dead body connected to it. And so the two leave the car around the corner at the grocery store. And I want to insert another piece of evidence that they presented against Julius, was that when Liddell and Julius dropped the GMC off at the grocery store, they both got down at the store and they were on video. And so they showed this video to try to somehow prove that Julius was involved because he was at the grocery store where the GMC was. But according to Julius, he was just there helping out Liddell, and he didn't know at the time that it was connected to the body. So after they leave the chop shop, they end up driving down to the community center to see if Chris was there. And Julius says by the time he got down, he went in, and Liddell and Chris were already in the corner arguing and having a serious conversation. And at this moment, Julius realizes that these two had something to do with this murder. And Julius says that this was his biggest downfall, that he didn't go to the police about it. But Julius says that, in his neighborhood, you aren't supposed to tell because bad things could happen to you or your family. And it wasn't his business. He just wanted to stay out of it. And he didn't want to have anything to do with it. And so Liddell and Chris were very close, and Julius was more of the outsider. Like I said before, Julius and Chris were kind of just acquaintances, and they were kind of helping each other out over the summer. And I feel like Liddell and Chris saw Julius as the perfect person to set up for this crime. And it wasn't the first time Liddell was involved in something like this, and he knew he had to be the first one to get to the police and blame someone else. And Julius states that Chris sleeps over the night after the murder, and the police coincidentally find the gun in the same bedroom where Chris slept. And, Julius says that he is in the wrong. He knows that, he should have went to the police about the murder once he figured it out, but he shouldn't have to pay with his life when he didn't take another life. And I also want to point out that in 2007, while Chris Jordan was in jail, 2 inmates came forward and said that Chris had began to brag to them that he actually shot Paul Howell, and that Julius was not even there that night, and that he hid the gun in the upstairs room. And these 2 guys ended up coming forward to testify, and both guys were actually on death row and got nothing. They got no benefit, no time off their sentences for coming forward with this information. The courts claimed that they were not reliable and that the jurors probably wouldn't believe them, so they denied Julius relief. I think this information is probably what gets me the most, because here you have 2 people coming forward, telling us that Julius is actually innocent, but our system won't believe him and won't allow him relief. And also, let's not forget that Chris Jordan only served 15 years of his 30-year sentence and is now a free man. And Julius's case is, he is currently almost out of options, and there is a petition going around that I'll tell you guys how to get to that in a second. And I just want you guys to know that Julius is on death row for something that I believe he didn't do or commit. And you're free to form your own opinion, and that's what I want you guys to do. You don't have to believe what I believe, but I do want you guys to do your own research and look further into this. And the last thing I want to say about Julius is that over the 19 years that he has been imprisoned, he has primarily been kept in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day. And he is bound with shackles for the hours that he is allowed outside. And he also only gets 3 5-minute showers a week and is allowed no physical contact with visitors, not even his family. And if that doesn't put you in the gut, I'm not sure what will. And I want you guys to check out a few more tools to help Julius. So you can go visit justiceforjuliusjones.com, and they actually have all of his affidavits. They have all of the information on there for you. You can go into a little bit further, his legal proceedings, where the trial stands right now. I did read somewhere that Julius Jones is set to be executed in about 115 days. And this is why this case is so urgent, and it's so important to get this case out and for it to be heard. And there's also a documentary on there to watch by Viola Davis called The Last Defense, and that also goes into much more detail than I ever could. And then the last thing I would urge you to do is sign a petition if you believe that Julius Jones is innocent. I would hate to see an innocent man get executed for something he did not do. And this is my way of getting the information out there. I encourage you to spread the word, pass the petition around, send it to your friends, send the documentary to your friends, and let's help this innocent man survive the death penalty. And that's all I have for Julius Jones, but I hope to continue to do these videos. Like I said, this is my first time. I hope you guys enjoy. I'm not here to gain followers. I just want you guys to share. And that's all I ask of you. And hopefully I'll have a new case up at least within the next 2 weeks, if not next week. So stay tuned. If you check out the link in my bio, I do have a link for Justice for Julius, and he has the petition link in that website as well as a documentary, and along with all his affidavits and things like that. But at the bottom, you can also click the link to sign the petition. Okay, now I'm done for it. Bye, guys.